What's up, everybody? Welcome to Conversations with me, your host, Jason Glaze. Hey, you're going to love this conversation. My good friend Andy Thompson is here. We basically look at Andy's story and his journey, church, working at church, and then what he's into now. But let me tell you, the nuggets that came out of this conversation are so beneficial and mind-blowing. You're going to love it. If you're involved in any kind of youth ministry, or if you're a parent, you're going to absolutely love this one. His insight into the youth, and especially the youth of today's culture, is absolutely amazing. He also talks a lot about leadership, team building, what makes a good team. Again, and we talk about Braves and Colts. Yeah, go figure. It's a great conversation. You're going to love it. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like it. Drop a comment. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. And hope you enjoy this one. Andy Thompson.
Jason Glaze.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
For doing this.
Absolutely.
I love your hat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We have had a rough weekend.
So listen, we are all in mourning of the loss of number 13 to yet another ACL.
Another ACL.
They don't build ACLs like they used to.
Let me ask you this. What does ACL even stand for?
No clue. That's a great question.
I think we should try to figure it out right
Do you
here.
know? Tamla doesn't know.
Articulary crisis ligament.
All I know is they don't build them like they used to.
They don't.
Because how old are you again?
75.
What year were you? What year were you born?
1988.
Yeah, so you didn't really get to experience the bad years with the Braves.
No. I mean, one of my best memories in my entire life is 1995, being 7 years old, and my parents let me stay up late and then watching them win the World Series. Javi Lopez is my favorite player of all time.
Love him.
Like, hands down. There's no one that will ever compete with number 8. Even when Eddie Rosario was wearing number 8, didn't like it.
Yep.
Because I think he should be retired, but that's just me. But yeah, I remember them winning. It was genuinely, it just set me on a huge trajectory of being a diehard Braves fan.
Yeah. One of my hilarious memories. So back then we threw watch parties.
Yeah.
For Braves, Javi Lopez hit a bomb, home run, right? Whole house went nuts. We were just like 4 or 5 families. Like 10 seconds later, they showed the replay, and Kim thought he hit another one. And she went nuts all by herself. It was awesome.
That is amazing.
Yeah. It's
been really fun. So I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. The 6-year-old is a boy and is obsessed with baseball. So basically all he does is he wakes up in the morning a lot of times before mom and dad. So this is great parenting. Knows how to turn on the Apple TV, and he watches every game highlights. Then about 12 to 14 hours later, you can ask him, hey, what was the score of the Rangers game last night? And he'll tell you exactly what happened.
Oh,
it's
wow.
crazy.
Wow.
Now, the issue is that he's a Pirates fan. So he likes the Braves, but he really likes the Pirates. I think it has something to do with him just liking Pirates in general. I don't think it's necessarily because their team is not that good. But this weekend, they played the Pirates, and the Pirates waxed them for 2 out of 3.
We ran to a buzzsaw.
And he talked trash the entire weekend.
Yes, he did.
The entire weekend.
My brother took my nephew out there to that park just
PNC?
for one game.
Yeah, because it's the best. It's ranked as the best stadium to see live.
I did not know that.
It is number 1.
Yeah, but he did. They flew out there, caught a game, flew back, just for the heck of it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it is. Out of the top list, and we could just make this podcast about baseball stadiums.
We can,
but that one's number 1, like above even Fenway or Wrigley or Yankee Stadium. It doesn't matter. Like, it's number 1.
Yeah, I've been to Fenway.
I have too.
That's the only other stadium I've been to.
I snuck into Wrigley.
Did you? Wow, like you really snuck in.
Yeah, so I was in a band after high school.
Okay.
We got signed. We toured for years, and we were playing in Chicago, right by Wrigley.
Okay.
And we I was like, I got to go see the stadium. So I just walked down to the stadium, and there's a security guard in one section, and he just happened right while we were there, just walk away. So I thought, well, this is my only chance. Walk all the way down to the field. It was like 2 days after the season had ended. And Derek Lee, you remember Derek Lee, who ended up being a Brave for the season? He was out there just long tossing. And it was nuts. And then I got kicked out. But I made it all the way down to
Well done. Well done.
That's a great stadium too.
So I was a Braves fan a Braves fan when they were terrible.
Yeah.
And here's what I can tell you: when they were all like out of shape with beer guts, they didn't tear ACLs.
Right.
They just didn't.
They didn't. They were built different.
They were built different.
Built Ford tough. Am I right?
I think we need to go back to the not being in such good shape or something.
Smoking cigarettes in the dugout. That's when they had it. That
Absolutely.
was simpler times.
Simpler times. Yeah, but it was painful being a Braves fan as a kid. Painful.
I know. I keep trying to explain that to my son's name's Fuller. I keep trying to explain it to him like, hey, things aren't always going to be like this where every year, like there's a good chance you're going to make the playoffs and they're going to win the division. But yeah, I totally sympathize and empathize with you. The fact that there's some rough years. And then after Bobby left, there was a rough 4 or 5 years that it was not fun to be a Braves fan. But that's the big thing. When you're a fan of something, you got to stick with it. Doesn't matter.
All right. We may never get to anything else other than sport. But listen, I'm not over the Falcons blowing the Super Bowl. Because I'm with you. Like, if you're a fan, you're a fan. Hang in there.
Yeah.
But I have not forgiven, accepted grief. I don't know what my deal is.
I know.
But I like getting nauseous at that logo now.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, when you're up 28-3, we had so many people at our house, and it literally was like, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen.
Yep.
You know, the Braves hadn't won a World Series. Georgia hadn't won a national championship, and you're just sitting there thinking this could be the first one since 95.
Yeah.
And just the fact that it was 28-3. And then we got the ball back so many times and just could not do anything. And honestly, now looking back, I'm honestly probably the most sad for Matt Ryan, just from the standpoint of that guy had, just an unbelievable career, but it's always going to be marked by 28-3.
Never was a Matt Ryan fan.
Oh, okay.
Here's why. 3rd and 8.
I know.
He's going to throw a 6-yard route
I
with
know.
a defender on the guy's back. 4th and 2, punt.
I know
Like,
exactly
can
what
we
you're about
not?
to say. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, too, you and I both have a love for cult documentaries.
We do.
We learned that.
Yes, we did.
Dude, I love them. I can't get enough of documentaries about cults.
Yeah, I think I find it fascinating, and obviously with the work that you do and being in ministry for a long time too, of just the work of people. It literally, I can't figure out what causes somebody to buy into something that hardcore. Now, when it comes to the Atlanta Braves, I'm in.
Yeah.
If that's a cult, then I'm a part of it, whether I want to be or not. But I think I just find it so fascinating how people can manipulate other people that far. So, you go to the Jonestown, you go to all those different things where it's like he literally convinced them to drink the stuff that they knew something was going to happen.
Yeah.
Or what was that one cult where they all wore Nikes, black Nikes, the darkness or the dark, whatever they were called. It was the same thing. It was like those people, it was like these 2 old people had convinced, it was like 20 people.
Yeah.
To just, all right, we're just going to all die at the same time. It's like, it's just nuts.
So I'm watching one now called The Wild Wild Country on Netflix. This guy in India, this guru from India, I can't pronounce his name, not going to try. He basically...
Actually, I kind of want to hear you try.
No, not a chance. We'll call him George. He basically, the Indian government kicks him out. And so he comes and basically buys, I think, like 80,000 acres in Oregon and builds a cult. Now, here's the fascinating thing. Most cults, like let's say Waco,
right,
Jonestown, they prey on the vulnerable, the needy, the broken. The fascinating thing about this guy is he had very well-off, intelligent people bought in. Very well off. He had lawyers bought in. He had doctors bought in. Yeah, like, how do you do that? It's weird.
It is. I mean, you're totally right. There is definitely a type that gets preyed upon.
Yeah.
And like when it is that, it gets even more confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Do you watch any of the Charles Manson stuff? And
yes.
Like any of those? It's like, it's just that there is a formula to some of them. But then also you think of quasi-Christian, followings that you're like, I mean, somehow y'all twisted the truth enough, but that you believed it or you said it enough to believe it, which I know in counseling, sometimes saying things out loud over and over again, kind of diffuses it. But I think also it can do the opposite, which is when you say things out loud and you can start to believe it even more.
100%.
So I find especially quasi-Christian cults, or some people would not call them cults, like most fascinating, because I do truly believe that that's how Satan works the best. Like if you want to see a clear picture of sin and you want to see a clear picture of how Satan works, it's by looking at these quasi-Christian things where it's like, we're going to make it so close and we're going to change some certain things, like we're going to change some certain things. I'm going to get all these people moving in one direction. It's like, if you don't pay attention to the fact that he is absolutely brilliant and there's a reason that his name is the deceiver, like it literally, to me, has always just been fascinating.
Yeah.
Getting so close to what Christianity is, but yet so far.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. When you look at the early church, it seems like Satan's tactic was to persecute. Mm-hmm. Well, that backfired because the more he persecuted, the bigger it got. So then he said, let's create something just close enough.
Right.
Like a replica.
Yeah.
Just close enough. You want to start a cult?
You and me?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would we call it?
I don't know.
On the count of 3, let's come up with a name. 1, 2, 3.
So, are you a fan of The Office?
Oh, it's my favorite show of all time.
So, Creed said that when it comes to cults, you make more money as a leader, but have more fun as a follower. I don't care about money. I don't want to be the leader.
You just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Great.
So you can be the leader.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll start watching some more documentaries and figuring out how to do this. We'll try to buy a tract of land down in Roswell or something.
We'll call them Jesus Braves.
Jabraves. That's what you actually meant to say.
That's what I meant to say. Oh, yes. So, dude, I cannot wait to have it. Well, we're already having this conversation. I've been looking forward to this. I first met you. I came home from work one day, and you were in my living room playing a guitar for a bunch of teenagers.
Speaking of cults. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're just kidding on that one.
It seems like a cult based off of what you just said.
Based on what I just said, even though it was not a cult.
No.
Yeah, you were leading, was it a Young Life or Wildlife? Wildlife. So this is middle school.
Yep.
And you were my daughter's leader.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, somebody's in my living room playing a guitar.
Yep.
And he's really good.
Well, mediocre at best.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's when you stop playing for a while, your hands hurt. You remember how to do it, but it just takes a long time. But yeah, no, that was such a fun period of my life. It's really what led me to want to do ministry. And especially, I didn't care about middle schoolers until then.
Oh.
And so the area director of Young Life here in Dawson County, Sean
Dutcher.
Yep, Sean Dutcher, who's unbelievable. He was like, hey, I need somebody to lead middle school, and I think you'd be the right person. And so I did. Mm-hmm. And it was my first picture into what could be. And actually, it really defined the next decade plus from just that experience of leading middle school students.
So it all started with Wildlife.
It did. It all started with Wildlife. I changed my degree after I was in a band. I toured, like I said. And once I got home, I just wanted to get through college really fast, as quickly as possible. And I knew that they would always need male teachers no matter what. But I actually started out as a psych major. I wanted to go into counseling.
Oh, wow.
Sat through my first psych class and I was like, this isn't for me. So then as I started doing middle school stuff, I was like, you know what? They always need middle school male teachers. It's always a good thing to fall back on. If the ministry thing doesn't work out or something else doesn't work out, they will always need male teachers.
Sure.
Which is still true to today.
Sure.
And it will always be true.
So
because of my experience, I realized real quickly that no one likes middle schoolers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think everyone had a really bad middle school experience.
Yep.
And that's why people just, it's awkward. And I don't know if you know this, but babies change rapidly at a huge at a huge rate, if you will. So from the time that they're born all the way to 12 months, think about the changes that happen in a baby.
Yeah.
It's significant. Mm-hmm. The only other time that your body actually goes through those changes mentally, what is the word? Physiology.
Yep. Go.
Yeah, I'm from Dawsonville.
Yeehaw.
The only other time that happens is in those 3 years of middle school.
Really?
So it's like people would just get down on them, or just I remember I used to just say, well, what do you do for a living? I'd say, well, I work with middle school students, and they would just say, God bless you. And I'm like, y'all are missing it. This is the prime opportunity to help somebody in their life. I had a great middle school experience.
Really?
I had a great middle school experience, and I realized real quickly that no one else did. And so then I made my mission to I wanted middle schoolers to look back on those 3 years and just say, you know what, that was actually really awesome. I went to private school, And then my parents put me in public school, Dawson County High School, which is a great school.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. And it just was clear to me that I just want to help people. I want to help people have good middle school experiences. And so that's why I went back and got my middle school degree, other than the fact that I knew I could have a job. But ultimately I wanted to go into ministry and help middle schoolers discover a faith of their own.
It's fascinating what you say about middle schoolers, because when we take histories here, you know, we start early childhood, walk our way forward. Middle school years are always the toughest. Always the toughest. It's where the rejection happens. It's where they start to like really divide out into cliques. The body, like you said, is going through so much. The hormones are nuts. It's just, God, it's a hard time.
It's such a hard time. And it's just, they just need somebody to believe in them.
Yeah.
They just need somebody who will be okay with their weirdness and their awkwardness. Like, I love middle school students and I love college students. I don't really like high schoolers because middle schooler, what I've figured out, I was a college small group leader for 4 years, and with middle school, they're both kind of at the same exact point, whether you realize it or not. Like, they're not too cool for school. They realize that they don't have it all figured out. Where high school, they think they're too cool for school and they think they have it all figured out. And I love those two categories because it feels like it's easier to walk alongside somebody who's like, I just don't have it figured out. And middle schoolers don't. And college students, I feel like, don't, because they're trying to figure out, like, I mean, our college small group would go from the depths of, you know, deep and darkest sin to how do I sign up for a checking account? You know, but it was fun because it was practical, and it was literally like we could just go one way or the other of like, let's get you ready for life. The same thing with middle school. It's like, let's get you ready for high school. So that some of those decisions that people make in high school are detrimental. It's like, can we prepare you or help you, you know, go in with a faith that is your own, and it's not your parents' faith. It's not your coach's faith or your small group leader's faith, but it's a faith that you own yourself. Yeah. I had a boss who once said that middle school is the last preventative ministry. Ooh. And for the rest of your life. Yeah. So it's the last time that you can actually prevent, heartache and trouble.
Yeah. Is it Dobson, James
Dobson.
Yeah. He says basically the same thing is once they hit high school, they are who they are. And now it's survive. Yeah. You know, and I don't think that's 100% true, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. The formation is kind of there until you hit that brokenness piece again.
It is.
Yeah.
It totally is.
You know, one thing that's always puzzled me about the way the church is structured, not all churches, but most, is, okay, so you got somebody young that comes in and wants to be in ministry. We start them out in the youth, and then they graduate themselves up to adult. Right. I think that's completely backwards.
I totally agree.
Completely backwards. If we look at where people are being formed and the important years and the crucial years, that's where you need your most experienced, talented. For sure. Why do we do that? Why do we have that so backwards?
Yeah, I think it's just like, I mean, if you think of just the hierarchy of any organization, it's like the higher you get, you know, the more influence that you have or whatever. And I feel like people just assume that when you get to adults, you have, but you and I both know, and we both were a part of a church for a while that literally emphasized middle school and high school students because that's where the pastor's heart was. And they dictated whether a parent actually came to church.
Yeah. Very true.
And that was the best thing that they did. The best thing that church accomplishes is those years from middle school all the way through high school. Oh, yeah. Opinion. And it was because it was, but to your point, it's like you think you've graduated once you're working with adults, but it's really not. First of all, adults are boring. They really are. They're boring. You and I could have a long conversation about, 401ks and like, that's boring. Yeah. For sure. Middle schoolers want to talk about farting, and it's like, that's funny. And that's way better to be a part of. And I want to hear what you have to say about that. Or, I picked this booger that was larger than the state of New Mexico. I don't know. Like, that's way more engaging, and that's way more fun to be around than boring adults sitting around talking about their 401ks and what, what their boss said to them. It's like, that's boring. I don't want to do that. Yeah. But
So, yeah.
we all chase that. We all chase that. And for some reason, the church makes it feel like that is what you're going towards of like, well, once I'm a lead pastor of a campus or a senior pastor, then I've really made it. It's like, nah.
Yeah. I tell you what I'm looking for is a counselor to bring on staff that is extremely gifted and trained with that age.
Yeah.
Because we don't. Every now and then, if an old soul comes in
Yep.
and they're 16, 17 years old and we know it's God ordained, we will journey with that team.
Right.
But other than that, like if your flesh is still working for you, I don't know what to do.
Right.
I just don't. So
Right.
To work with like middle school age and even younger, it takes such a gift and a calling. That's just ridiculous.
I mean, the big things, they just want to know who do I like and who likes me? And is this a safe place?
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, it might be even easier than you're thinking. I think it's like you providing those two things of this is a safe place. And I want you to know that I like you and that I care about you.
Yeah.
You matter and you belong.
Yeah.
And if students can walk away, I feel like this generation especially needs to know that they matter and that they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And they matter to their small group leader or the youth pastor. They matter to God. They matter to everyone. And you're a part of this. Like you belong to this as well.
Yeah. So you decided you want to go to the ministry route.
Yep.
And your first church employment.
Yeah. So I grew up in a church. My dad and my uncle started a church, the church that you and I go to
Now. Yeah.
So they started the church. So I've grown up in the church. I had great small group leaders, which you know them, and great, just pastors.
Yeah.
So I was related to half of them, but it just really set me in the right direction. So they gave me a picture of what ministry should look like and how to love people and care for them. So I just wanted to do that. So I left our church, which now I'm back. So that's an interesting thought process too, of leaving for 12 and a half years and then coming back.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah, we can get there for sure. So I started off as a middle school intern at Brownsbridge Church, which is part of North Point Ministries. There's 8 campuses now, but at that point there was only 5. And I made $3.25 an hour. I was still going to college at the same time of getting my degree, but I made $3.25. And I had an amazing boss who just literally poured into me, let me fail, guided me, and shaped and molded me. I would say I had 2 bosses that were doing that the whole time. And so I started off as an intern. I became the associate director of middle school at Brownsbridge Church.
At what age?
That was the associate director. I was only 22.
Goodness gracious.
So we had at that point probably 600-700 students. I don't know, 200 small group leaders at that point. So then they gave me a campus to be the middle school director at the age of 24. Probably shouldn't have done that. No, I was only there for literally 6 months. And some of my friends, if they end up watching this, they'll say it was less than 6 months. It really was 6 months. I counted it. So I became middle school director at Buckhead Church, which is down in Atlanta. A white guy from North Georgia is perfect for that. So then, though, my boss back at Brownsbridge became the lead pastor at Brownsbridge. So then I came back and I took over Brownsbridge. I was there for 6 years. It was my longest job that I had in North Point Ministries. I've had a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So I did that. Then I went and worked for our central team. So basically what we would do is equip all of the campuses with content, with hosting, with video elements. So that was over all of students. So that was over high school and middle school. I did that for a short period. Then somebody higher up gave me a call. The highest person in our organization called me and asked me to come to North Point to be a middle school director again. And so they needed to shift where they were going. So he trusted me and I came in, and it was the most fun that I've had in ministry in a really long time. A, because I got to kind of just turn a team and move them in the right direction. And then B, COVID. So a lot of people had a terrible experience in COVID.
Yeah.
I had a great experience in COVID.
Yeah.
Because it just brought like the freshness of like, how are we going to reach these students? Like we aren't physically with them. So how can we do this? So it was actually a really fruitful time in my opinion. So I was there. Then I became a family ministry director of North Point Community Church. And then I took coming from family ministry, I took a job in raising support.
Really?
Generosity.
Really?
Yeah, because they have something to do with each other. Realized real quick. They don't.
I did not know this step.
Yep. So Andy has a TV show that's on after Saturday Night Live.
What's it called next?
Your Move.
Oh, Your Move, yeah.
And so I raised money for that.
Oh.
And that was only about 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Brownsbridge, which was a sweet way to kind of end my career at North Point. I ended at Brownsbridge as the communications director, and then I became the interim middle school director at the end. So I literally wrapped my entire time up at Brownsbridge as a middle school guy.
Yeah. Out of all those jobs you had at North Point or at a North Point campus, which was your favorite?
Yeah, I would say the first time I was a middle school director at Brownsbridge.
Why?
They're my people. And they were sweet. They were kind. It was a whole bunch of growth real fast. I would say it's when the megachurch model was really growing, and it was just ridiculous. We went from the 600 students to 1,200 at a camp, just from Brownsbridge.
Wow.
And small group leaders went from 200 to it was like 400 and 500. It was over the top. And it was just a lot of fun because I just had so much fun because of the people that I was around and the people that I had assembled, which I think we're going to jump into in a little while, but the people that I assembled in that team, like there just wasn't a better group of people that I could have done that with. So that whole group was just so much fun. So I think that was probably, but all of them offered different life experiences and all of them offered different challenges. And all of them were fun. Like I figured out how to make things.
Even
fun.
raising money?
Raising money was fun because of the people that you get to meet.
Okay.
And interact with.
I hate raising money.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I read a book, it's called Abundant. And it's this whole idea of my job was to present opportunities and let the Holy Spirit do what the Holy Spirit does.
Wow. Get the Holy Spirit involved.
So it literally, and that's what, especially in fundraising in regards to church, nonprofit, Christianity, etc. I wouldn't say that this is fundraising in the corporate world, but it literally is. My job is to present opportunities, and I'm not the one who's going to close it. So it gave you a lot of freedom, and then it also was just this whole mindset of I'm not in charge.
Wow.
So God's got to do something in that person's heart in order for them to want to write a check.
Wow.
And I've got to be okay with that.
And the book's called Abundant?
Yep.
Yeah, I need to check that out.
It's a great book.
Because I love it when we find the sweet spot of our job and his job.
Yep.
Because we usually default one way or the other.
Right.
But to find that sweet spot of what's my job, what's God's job.
Right.
So before I get into your team building and like what is a good team and all that, you said something interesting a minute ago I want to go back to. You said that you had a couple of good bosses and they let you fail. Yeah. Talk more about that. What's the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in our society in general, everyone, I think it's the social media. I think it's all of it. Everyone looks at perfection. Every time you turn your head, there's something that's perfect, or at least perceiving that it's perfect. And so you're supposed to get it right instantly. So the fact that I had bosses that were like, no, I want you to go try it. You go by yourself and try it, see what you can do, and then come back and tell me how it was. So there were certain things that were like huge successes, and they were like, great, we'll do that again or take it to the next level. Or there was things that failed, and they would walk and they say, that's no big deal. That's great. That's where learning comes from. Learning comes from when you fail. Learning doesn't come when you succeed over and over again. There's no more learning. You've conquered it. Like you've succeeded.
Yeah.
So the more that you fail, the better off you're going to be as a person, in my opinion, just from the standpoint of you're only going to be trying to get better and try to find out what that solution is, to whereas the other side of it is that you already have a solution. I had one boss who always said life, and I think this might be Dean that we were talking, but life is a laboratory, and you're just trying to see what it's like. You're trying to figure out things, and it's okay if things fail. It's not pass or fail. And the quicker that you can realize in your Christian walk, your professional walk, it's not pass or fail, the easier things get.
Wow.
And the easier it becomes.
Wow. Yeah. I think a lot of bosses are not willing to let their people fail because they think it's a reflection on them.
For sure.
Right. So we're talking classic codependency, right?
Yep.
To where If you fail, that means I didn't do my job well.
Correct.
Instead of seeing failure as success, and this is part of the process.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't know if this story is true, but I hope it is. I've heard that Abraham Lincoln, before he ran for president, and he had to fill out his qualifications, he put down every failure he'd ever done and said, here's why I'm qualified to be president. If that story is true, that's brilliant.
It is brilliant.
He got it, didn't
But
he?
that's true. If you think about any time in your life of where you saw the most growth, it's 100% in your failures.
For sure.
So why are we afraid of failing? Like that, and I don't mean to make it just such a blanket statement, but it literally is like there's no reason to fear failure.
Well, I think the reason we're afraid of failing is because you can look at failure one of two ways. You can look at failure as something I do or something I am.
Yep.
Right? So those who think if I fail, I am a failure,
Yep.
obviously they're going to be terrified of it. They're going to avoid it. They're not going to take risks.
Right.
But if they see that, yes, I failed, but it says nothing about my identity.
Right.
It's just what I did. And then to throw the icing on the cake that this is actually a great opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why, I mean, you go through scripture and there's so many times where God asked the Israelites to memorialize things and just to remember to look back and where they've come. And that's the same thing with us. It's like those failures are those stones that they put up. You know, it's like just keep remembering like you are making progress.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. All right. So you had the opportunity to actually lead teams.
Lots of them.
Yeah. And I know that, man, that was your sweet spot. What is, I know there's not one thing, right? But if you, let's just say somebody's watching this and they are a team leader who's struggling, or there's someone who that they're about to start building a team. Just give us what are the vitals like to having a healthy team?
Yeah. Number one is trusting your gut. Like you have to learn how to trust your gut. So you've seen me on stage quite a few times.
Oh yeah.
I had to learn real quickly, especially in hosting, depending on who I was in front of, to trust my gut of what I can let slip and what I can't. So when I'm with middle schoolers, I'm very cautious because I know I can't make any joke that resembles anything about farting or whatever without me losing them completely.
They're gone.
Or, you know, when I'm with college students, like I can push the boundary, or high school students, I can push the boundary a little further and I can push a little further. So I've had to learn how to trust my gut in that. It was the same thing with leadership of like, do I have a good feeling about this person? First of all. So that was always number one in my checklist of like, am I excited about this person and do I have a good feeling? So the reason I learned how to actually trust my gut was because I made probably 1.5 bad hires at the beginning. And once I did that, it literally was like I saw the shrapnel that it created and things that I just got excited about because it checked the boxes that my bosses wanted. But inwardly, I remember being like, that's a little bit weird. But I know that my bosses are going to sign off on this so I can hire them. So I learned real quickly when I made especially one that was not the best hire that I could have. The person was really good at work. Don't get me wrong. There was nothing about that person that didn't actually get the job done. It was more about the team chemistry side that it just didn't work. And that's totally fine. That person has gone on to be extremely successful and that's amazing. But I realized real quickly the whole idea of trusting my gut of like, oh, I should have paid attention to what I felt immediately with that individual. So, but you have to put your gut through a whole bunch of different tests in order to make sure that you can actually trust it.
And now we're back into the benefit of failing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, if I trust my gut of where I want to go eat, then I'm eating at Ryan's buffet all the time. Getting those rolls, getting that honey butter, and I'm going to put that honey butter on anything. Quote me on that. You should just tweet that out or X that out, whatever it's
whatever
called.
it is now.
So trust your gut was a big thing. Number two, the organization I worked in was very big on personality assessments, whether that's Right Path, whether that's Enneagram, whether that's the color temperaments, whether, there's just a long list of things.
Yeah.
So I would always look at, okay, if I have 4 or 5 positions, I know me, I don't need me. So I need to find, let's just use the color temperaments. There's 4 color temperaments. I don't know if you've ever covered those on these. Anyway,
Not on the podcast, but I know
not on
what
the podcast, but there's red, which is kind of just like domineering.
Go.
They'll just go. Control is what they're kind of motivated by. There's yellow, which is me, which is like everything is fun. I want to have fun.
Yep.
Green, which is kind of like the procrastinating / they can mold to whoever they're around.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got blue, who's really detailed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look at those 4 things. I'm just using that as an example. Right path is way more in depth, and I would pay attention. I would pay attention mostly to right path, but I'm just using the colors as the example.
Mm-hmm.
So I would know that I'm yellow. I would know that I probably need to find somebody who's blue in order to handle the details.
Yep.
And who's going to be able to execute. I want to find somebody green who's going to be, can work with everybody. Mm-hmm. And then I need somebody who's red who's going to push back about anything that I said.
What is your second color?
My second color is green.
Yeah. So when I took it, I'm as yellow as Big Bird, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, all yellow with a touch of red.
Right.
And I really thought I'd have more red than that.
Yeah.
But yellow red is a fascinating conversation. I can see how yellow and green would go together really well. Yellow and red seem to contradict each other.
Yes.
Which
I would say, and in different settings, you kind of are different things.
Mm-hmm.
At home, I'm really green.
Are you?
And my wife and Tiffany would just look at me and be like, "You're 1,000% green." She is as red as it gets.
Oh, is she?
So she can clearly tell. She's just like, "No,
yeah,
you're not. You have yellow and you have green." I'm like,
Yep.
"Yes, ma'am." Even though I do test as yellow red, but I think red is learned because of work.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so I would look at the team and I would say, "Hey, I know my personality. I need to make sure that I'm representing the other personalities in order to create a uniform thing." The big thing about the colors, or what Kathleen Edelman says, is that Jesus was all 4 and had to operate as all 4. So your job is to not, get settled in, well, I'm just this. Like, you're working towards trying to be all 4. So that's kind of the perspective. And that was the big thing that I took away from the colors, which were just like, I think that we need every type of person represented, so that if we do have a volunteer who is just red all get out, then I need to have a groups director or somebody who's going to be in charge of small groups who's going to be just as red. Mm-hmm. Or I need somebody who their direct report is somebody who's green, who's like, I can totally see where you're coming from. Let me see what I can do. So I just tried to have a mixture of personalities. I feel like a lot of people sometimes want people who are like them.
Yep.
And it's natural. But if you also think about marriage, like, we usually don't marry the person who's just like us.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the best kind of duo, in my opinion, is when you try to figure out, like Tiffany and I are opposites in a lot of different things, but that's what makes us work. And that's kind of the thing that I kind of just had. It was like, I need to find opposites so that we're all not just one personality, or we have this one type. So I would say, trust your gut, learn people's personalities, and then honestly, get out of the way. It's like, you have to let people lead. Again, it goes back to the failure conversation. It has to go back to that. You have to let people lead. I had micromanagers as bosses before, and it sucks. And everyone knows that it sucks. And then you have 6 people who are talking about you, or like, it's all these different things that happen. So I think it's those 3 main things. And the idea of like getting out of the way is just, if you hired somebody or you put them through the process that is as extensive as what North Point puts people through the process, it's like, you have to instantly trust them that they can do their job. And then that's when people will develop trust in you, because you're giving them those opportunities.
Wow. Let's go back to your first one, which is trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
If we had to pick a word other than gut, intuition, would that work?
That was the number one thing I was going to say.
Intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's kind of hard to define, intuition. I think discernment can be confused with that, and they may be two different. Maybe they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. But from what I've understood, what intuition is, it's basically like passive learning, where you're learning, but you don't know you're learning, right? And that takes reps to actually build that gut, that intuition.
For sure.
It takes reps.
And I think that's the nice thing about the organization that I worked for, is because there were so many different small group leaders. There were so many different volunteers that you're working with. There were so many other staff people that you're working with. Your gut becomes pretty strong because you have to deal with those personalities, or you have to deal with situations, or parents, which I get. Now I get. I didn't necessarily get it at first, of why they were so passionate about their kid that they birthed. So stupid.
Yeah,
I'd
what are
be
they
like, why do they care? I'm like, duh, it's their offspring. But when you deal with all those difficult types of people, it causes you to figure out, like, you know, how you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
Or you see things. You know, Tiffany was a groups director, and there was a few times where she would come home and she was like, there's just something off about that person, but not enough to not let them serve. So I'm going to let them serve. And then I promise you, it was 2 months later, it came back and bit her. And so even watching other people learn to trust their guts, even gave me, or their intuition, gave me the confidence to be like, okay, like when she felt that, like you have to actually go with that.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true with me. Like even watching it from her perspective, it was like, okay, I can trust myself.
Yeah.
If I get a weird feeling about somebody, that means that probably a parent's going to get a weird feeling about somebody, and I don't want them interfacing with a parent.
Yeah, that's so good. I've learned that. I've also learned, let's say we've been here since 2008. What is that? 16 years. 16 years? Yeah. I've learned that a woman's gut or intuition is so valuable because it's different than a man's. Like if I want to hire somebody, I will do the initial interview, and then they'll go through two interviews with Tamala and Melissa.
Yeah, smart.
They go through more interviews with the ladies on staff than they do me.
Yeah.
And I
Totally agree.
And I have totally learned to trust their gut.
Totally agree.
Yeah, because one time I didn't. I was like, what are you saying? Like, what are y'all seeing? And they were absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing about trusting your gut. It's, do you have somebody else that you're bouncing that off of? Because it would be like, you know, North Point, I mean, it's like, it is an interview process. It is, you're going to see at least 10 interviews. So if somebody else picked up on something that I picked up or I felt odd about, it was like, I can't ignore that because that's another data point.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. I think women have this way better than we do, because we'll just be like, oh, that's a shiny Cadillac and that person seems awesome. Let's go for it. And with our personalities, which are very, you know, we just get excited about anything.
Yep.
So we can be like, oh man, this person's awesome. It's like, yeah, but my wife is really good at this, but have you thought about this, this, or this, or this? Or when they're in that situation, what are they going to be like?
Yeah. And it depends on how desperate I am.
For sure.
This was years ago. I was desperate for another male counselor. Had a guy, I was like, he checks all the boxes, love it. First interview with the ladies, and they're like, are you serious right now? Like, what are you thinking? I'm like, oh, okay. So let me back up. But it was my desperation of needing another counselor so bad that it skewed everything that I was seeing.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy.
I love it. Love this. All right. So let me ask you this question. So you're passionate about the youth.
Yeah.
If you look at like, and you know, with every generation, they're so different. And like what reaches every generation is so different, right? And we have to adapt. This current generation of, let's say, middle schoolers, high schoolers, what are we missing? What do they need? Well, what do they need? I think you already answered what they need.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like if let's say our mission is to bring the gospel to today's middle schoolers.
Yeah.
What does someone need to know about this present generation?
Well, first of all, you know, even the generation that I was born in, and probably the generation that you were born in, you know, the previous generations would be like, you didn't have it as hard as I did. Or, you know, my dad's from Michigan and he'd have to go stand at the bus stop in the snow, you know, like, which is all true things. And his dad worked in a paper mill, and it literally, like, his entire life worked in a paper mill. That is a hard job. And he did that. And they had a lot of difficulties, you know, that they faced. I would say though, because of the internet, cell phones, anything that has a screen, this generation has it by far the hardest.
100%.
So I think you have to, especially as an adult, you have to identify that, and you have to claim that for them of, hey, they're growing up in a generation that is more difficult than what we grew up in. Now, it might not be as physically taxing as previous generations, which, you know, they did have harder jobs. Don't get me wrong. But I think with the psychological, the growing up too quickly because of things that they're seeing, all those different issues, like, you just have to acknowledge that they have it more difficult than you. And that's a pride issue with a lot of people, because they're like, well, you know, it just not as the way that it used to be. It's not. But also you have to acknowledge the fact that they're going through really probably the most difficult time period to be a middle school student.
I totally agree.
So I think you need to identify that. I think with the gospel itself and presenting the gospel, I do think that we have a sweeter generation. Like here's the positive side of things. I think people are more accepting than ever. I think that even some of the stuff, whether you agree with it or you don't, has caused people to accept. You know, if you think about you and I even going to high school and somebody might have come out as gay, it's like we did not respond in a loving manner.
Yeah.
More than likely.
Yeah.
And it feels like that at least has come to a point where it's like they care about the individual, they care about the people. So I think there's a good general understanding of care and compassion towards one another. And I think that's a huge positive thing that wasn't there in the last 10 years, in my opinion. So you have to acknowledge the good as well. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
I also think that you have to reach them from the standpoint of Jesus was so ridiculously attractive. And I think we have to get this whole label. We're labeling way too many things. And that label has to go away and people need to fall in love with who Jesus was. So I think actually by presenting who Jesus was versus all the other surrounding things of what people think Jesus was, and remove that and fall in love with who he actually was, I think it'll actually be really desirable for them. You know, it's in the Christian world, especially where we live, it's just, there's too much of and I listened to Lee's podcast, which is really great. And I think he said something that was significant about the Bible Belt of just how socially it is. And like church is kind of a social thing where that's not necessarily what it was intended to be, which was really good. So Lee Rogers, good for you. In regards to that whole social side, but when you actually remove all of the things of church, or you remove all of the things that people are hearing on social media, and you actually read what Jesus was about and who he was, like it's very desirable.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think it's actually closer to culture than what people are thinking that it is. Jesus was accepting of everyone. He loved everyone. He sat with tax collectors. He spent all the time with the people who needed a doctor. And I think that's what in this generation alone, it's like, we need to teach that. We need to get back to the basics of who Jesus was. And I'm not saying that you disregard the Old Testament. I'm not saying that you disregard past acts. I worked for, I'm saying though, like those 4 books of like emphasizing over and over and over again of who Jesus was is, I think, is the most important thing that we can do with the gospel. And
the only people he did get aggressive with those who did not accept the ones, right? Yeah.
I mean, you look at, I'm doing a Bible read through, and it's some Old Testament, Psalms, it's the standard one. But I'm going with Chuck Swindoll, who's my hero. And he, when you focus on the Gospels itself and you look at the spiritual leaders and just how obnoxious they were the entire time, I'm like, you're the ones that everyone was looking for guidance. And this is the way that you were treating people, where Jesus was so countercultural to the fact of what was happening. Yeah. So I think we just have to have that posture of like, Jesus was countercultural to what was happening. Jesus is still countercultural to what's happening, but also there's a little bit more of an overlay with this generation in the compassion and the love and the kindness that Jesus had towards those individuals, I think can come out in middle school students. So I think that's what we need to do, is focus on presenting who Jesus was. And it's great to use verses by Paul. It's great to use verses, to emphasize all these different things. But I also think plain and simple, it's the gospel and focusing on who Jesus was. And I think Young Life does this really well.
Sure.
Young Life would always, like, every talk is called A Person of Christ. And it was like, that's what you had to prepare. It was only about Jesus. It was only about Jesus. And that's why there's such a good outreach ministry, because a lot of people would come around to this idea of Jesus, but we also started with only talking about Jesus for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I think we got to get back to a Jesus-centered speaking schedule / a Jesus-centered who he was and what he stood for.
I love this. Love this. All right, let's make a little transition. So you were on staff at North Point, and unless I'm wrong, the optics all said you had total job security. I mean, you just deeply loved, valued, and all that. And then all of a sudden, we're going to make a transition, right? That had to be terrifying, just kind of because a lot of people are constantly in transition, and transition periods are so difficult. Yeah. They're so hard. Yeah. And I know you and I talked briefly a couple of times through your transition, but just kind of tell us, what was that transition like? Like, give us a story of how you decided to actually leave.
Yeah.
And
I
why.
mean, first of all, North Point has made me who I am.
Yeah.
In all the best ways. And I owe a ton of gratitude towards what that organization done, what Andy has done for me personally, what, Tom Chef Shunas, Brick Kitchen, Clinton Owery, all these people who came alongside and literally, just poured into me. Like, I owe everything to them, of even how to be a good dad, how to be a good, leader, all those things. It's all because of working for an incredible organization. Genuinely. It's amazing what I did. After I left the generosity job, I just realized that God was like just turning something in my heart completely. And it was a subtle, like, okay, I think I need to figure out what's next. And I'd always thought that no matter what, it was going to be ministry. And I think that's what God was using to just even push me of like, well, do you actually trust me? And do you realize that there's ministry that's happening outside in the secular world? I think the reason I loved Young Life was because it was going after all the secular kids who didn't want to be there. I mean, all their camps had smoker pits,
sure,
like where kids could go smoke cigarettes. They didn't care.
Yeah.
So, and that was always so desirable. So I one day was just driving to work, and I just literally had this thought. I was like, you know what? Like, the people that I worked best with was the guy I was in a band with, and his name was Ben. And his name's Ben Grant. And I just literally was like, I just need to figure out how to work with him. Because Ben would start a song, I'd finish it. I'd start a song, he'd finish it. We just had the best working relationship. I kid you not, about a week and a half later, he called and he was like, hey, things are getting really busy. Would you ever consider like coming to work with me? And I was like, yep. So it was just really clear, like God had kind of like lined up some stuff. So I worked with him for about 8 months, and we had started our own company. And then it just got to a point where it was like, okay, I can leave. But it was all because prompting of the Holy Spirit. And here's the identifying factor of why I did it and why I was okay with moving on. Number one, or really just the number one, was that my relationship with God was in the best place that it had ever been.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't me just trusting my gut.
Right.
As we said before, it was just clear of like, no, God's got something else for me. I'm terrified of doing it, but also like, I've got to trust him. So going back to what we said about memorializing or looking at our past failures or looking at things that we had to trust God, and seeing how I think we just move on way too fast. And so just to realize God's faithfulness in our year or in our years. So I started writing down this faithful journey timeline is what I called it.
Faithful journey timeline.
Yeah. So basically what I did was I went through my entire life of where God was faithful, even though I didn't know what was next. So I started writing down just in time after time of even in uncertainty or where I was going, God was extremely faithful, and the outcome was always extremely faithful. So then it was just like, okay, I love ministry. I love working with middle school students, but it just got to a place where it was like, it's something I couldn't ignore of like, God has something else. And so it was a 1.5-year process. Yeah. It might've seemed like it was a lot quicker, but it was a 1.5 year of God stirring stuff in my heart.
No, I watched it. It was long.
It was long. And then, Adam Johnson was my boss at the end, and he was just the best. And he couldn't have been the best. I mean, he literally was the best boss to have at that point, and the way that he walked with me and just helped me get to the place where it was like, okay, you're good to go. And he honestly was the cutting the cord in the most helpful way. Nice. What's the date? And that was the question. And he was like, I'm not doing this. Don't want you to leave. Yeah. But what is the date?
Wow. So, what a move.
But it was so helpful because it was like, okay, you're right. Thank you. That was helpful. That hurt. And it was not really hurt, but it was just like you lit the fire. Wow. So I think the faithful timeline of like, hey, God's got this. And I'm not trying to be a Christian cliche. It sounds like a t-shirt that you and I probably wore in the 90s. God's got this next to the no fear one that we probably did. But it literally was just like God has been so faithful over and over again. So my job is just to trust. And there'd been some other circumstances, like we got a rental house down in Florida. It's random. But God somehow allowed it to happen. And then it paid off, and financially it's paying off. And it's just like we trusted and we went with it.
Nice.
When I was 18 and had to sit down with my parents and tell them that I wasn't going to go to college and I was going to be a rock star. And eventually I did go back to school, and eventually it moved on, but it was like God was faithful in that. I had that whole experience. And so this was another one where it was just like, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to trust. And that's the hardest thing. If you can just get over that whole idea of just not being in control. And that's hard, and that's difficult because we want to control everything. But
for sure.
Using kind of the journey of the timeline or the faithful mindset and just remembering over and over again where he had been faithful helped make the decision a lot easier.
Yeah. And earlier you mentioned about the children of Israel would stop and build these things. They were called Ebenezers.
Yep.
The word Ebenezer, I believe it means God has brought me thus far. That's what that journal was.
Yep.
So when you sat down and wrote out that timeline, what'd you call it?
Yeah, just a faithful journey timeline.
That you were just building those Ebenezers.
Correct.
That gave you strength and hope to.
Right. And we all need to do that.
Oh man, that's brilliant.
Because it only encourages you, and it only helps you in your relationship with the Lord. It's like you just pay attention to those.
Wow. All right. So what are you doing right now? Tell everybody.
So I started a company with Ben, who I was in a band with, and it's called We've Got You Creative. So basically what we do is video production. So we come in, you have an idea, we sit down. I'm more of the creative side, where it's like, all right, let's figure out how to get to where you want to go. And I'll help you write the script. I'll help you write the sessions. Or you want a master class. You have a lot of knowledge. You've written some books. You want to present those books and either package it as a small group study, et cetera. So we would come in. I'd help you navigate all of those different things. We would film it and then, edit it and get you ready and send it out.
Wow.
So we've done a lot of stuff in the leadership realm. We've done a lot of stuff with Pat Lencioni. We've done stuff with Birds on a Wire, doing all of their curriculum. And then we do a whole bunch of just random jobs. So Ben has worked with Salesforce, with Yamaha, with just a lot of big companies.
Wow.
So it's just been fun. And then we did a 45-minute documentary on my friend who sold his lumber business, and it was awesome.
And went and started a cult?
No, I wish. I would follow it. If he started a cult. If John Vaughn started a cult, I'd follow it. To the ends of the earth, I'd follow that man. So we just do anything in video production. So whether it's marketing, or you have a product, or you have, you just want information. We've done a lot of stuff with schools of like, hey, we just need an about us. We've done stuff with roofing companies. Like, it's just a wide range of groups. Like, we'll take anyone, and we just have fun doing it. And our job is to make the process extremely easy and get you your content as fast as possible. So it's just as simple as that.
And so people can find you. What was the name of the company again?
We've got you creative.com. So
good name.
I came up with it because it was just like, you just think about it. People say it all the time. And the more that I hear it of, no, don't worry, we've got you. So we just wanted that to be the overtone of like, no, we've got you. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and that's totally fine. Like, we've got you, and we'll help you through this entire process.
That's brilliant marketing right there.
Thank you.
Are you enjoying this work?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Really?
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's fun helping ministries succeed. It's fun helping businesses succeed, and just meeting. I wrote this on LinkedIn not too long ago, just this idea of when you're in the church world, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just kind of see one lens in the people that you work with, and just realizing that there's so many people doing such great things.
Yeah.
And even, we were with a produce company last week in Wisconsin, and it's like, they're doing unbelievable things. Like, they're literally feeding the Midwest.
Yeah.
And they had such a good culture, and they had all these different things. And it's just, people are doing great things everywhere. And we get so bogged down by what the news says or what media says, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, yeah, but there's a lot of light. And there's a lot of people doing some really good things.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, to come full circle, you're now back attending the church that brought you up. That's fascinating. And that's where you and I go to church together now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been, it's really fun. Like, the first few Sundays that I was back and just not working on a Sunday, which was the first time in 12 and a half years. It was fun because I had all the people that I obviously grew up on, and people that have been praying for me for my entire life. And then just such a new group of people, like such as yourself, of just helping this church grow. And so I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I did tell Lee, I was like, hey, don't ask me to do anything for 6 months.
Oh yeah. He and I have had conversations. And because I said, so what are we going to have Andy do? And he said, nothing. I was like, huh? And he's like, yeah, okay. I get it. We're going to let him rest for a little bit.
Yeah. I'm super excited about jumping in and then just being, what you are to the church. Mm-hmm. It's like, I do have a lot of knowledge. Mm-hmm. I do have a lot of experience, and I can't wait to just give it away.
But I totally get just wanting to chill for a bit.
I can count on the hands prior to me moving to this church, the amount of times that I went to church with my wife.
Yeah.
And it was 2 times.
Wow.
So, and there's nothing to that. That's just what it is when you work in church. Like, there's nothing negative to that. Mm-hmm. The Sunday morning environment. She had a Sunday morning environment. We both signed up for it. That's what it was. But just being able to help her in the mornings and getting to church, it's like, we just need to do this for just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I will be willing to do whatever the church needs me to do.
I think this season is a sweet one. I would say stay there as long as God wants you to.
Yeah.
We'll fight the urge to get you busy.
Well, I mean, I have lots of thoughts, but I just sit there and I'm like, yeah.
Okay. Lee, did you hear that? He has lots of thoughts.
I have lots of thoughts, Lee. I'm just kidding. I really don't have many thoughts.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
This has been awesome.
So much fun.
Yeah. Go Braves.
Go Braves. Chop on.
Chop on.